Madame Abina had always been known in Kumasi as a strong and successful woman. She built her business from the ground up, traveling across countries to make deals and expand her work. For the last few weeks, she had been abroad finalizing an important contract, one that would open even bigger doors for her company. Though she loved her work, her heart always belonged at home with her only son, Kojo, and his young family. This time, instead of calling ahead, Abina thought it would be sweeter to surprise them. She pictured Kojo's wide smile, the hug he would give her, and the laughter that would fill the living room when she opened her suitcase of gifts. She had carefully chosen them, fabrics in rich colors for her daughter-in-law, toys for her grandson, and some fine clothes and cologne for Kojo. The thought of their joy made the long flight back to Ghana easier. When she arrived at her home, her heart raced with excitement. She pushed open the door, already smiling, expecting to hear voices or even the smell of food cooking. Instead, she stepped into silence. The air inside the house felt heavy, nothing like the warmth she imagined. There was no music, no laughter, no welcoming footsteps rushing to greet her. Just a strange, tense quiet that made her pause at the doorway with her bags still in hand. Her smile slowly faded as she looked around, realizing something was not right in her son's home. Abina set her bags down slowly, her heart beating faster with every step she took into the silent house. Something was pulling her toward Kojo's room, a mother's instinct she couldn't ignore. She walked through the hallway, noticing how the curtains were drawn, the air stale, as if no one had cared to open the windows in days. When she reached Kojo's door, she pushed it open gently, expecting to see him reading or working on his laptop. What she saw instead froze her in place. Her son lay on the bed, his skin pale and damp with sweat. His breathing was shallow, and he looked like he hadn't had proper rest in days. The sight hit Abina like a punch to the chest. She dropped the small gift she had been holding for him and rushed to his side. "Kojo, my son," she cried softly, touching his forehead. He was burning hot. His lips were dry, and he struggled even to sit up when he realized his mother was there. With a weak voice he whispered, "Mama, you came back." The words were faint, almost swallowed by the silence of the room. Abina's eyes filled with tears. "What happened? Why didn't anyone call me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Kojo looked away, ashamed, and murmured, "I've been sick for days. No one really took care of me." The confession stabbed her heart. She glanced around the room, and that was when she noticed the small table beside his bed. Scattered on it were empty medicine bottles, some knocked over, some with caps missing. It was clear he had been struggling alone, trying to treat himself with whatever little he had left. Abina's hands trembled as she picked up one of the bottles, realizing the medication was meant to be taken under proper supervision. She felt a wave of anger mixed with fear. How could her son be left in this state? How could anyone in the house not see how serious his condition was? She stroked his arm gently, whispering promises that she was here now, that he would not suffer alone any longer. Kojo closed his eyes, too weak to say more. Abina sat by his side, torn between rushing to get help and not wanting to leave him for even a moment. The gifts she had carried with so much excitement now seemed meaningless compared to the fragile state of her son before. The silence of the house made sense now. It was not peace but neglect, and Abina knew in her heart that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Abina finally forced herself to leave Kojo's bedside for a moment, wiping her tears and promising him she would return quickly. She wanted to know why no one in the house had taken care of him. As she stepped back into the hallway, she could hear faint music coming from the living room. The sound felt so out of place after what she had just seen. It was light, cheerful music, completely disconnected from the pain her son was going through in the next room. When she entered the living room, her eyes landed on a scene that nearly made her blood boil. At the center of the table sat Adwoa, Kojo's wife, dressed neatly, nails freshly painted, her hair styled as though she had just come from the salon. Spread out in front of her were stacks of cash. She was calmly counting the money, licking her finger every few notes, as if this was the only thing in the world that mattered to her. A phone was pressed to her ear, and she laughed loudly into it. "Yes, this is all mine," she bragged, flipping another bundle onto the pile. "Do you see why I don't stress? I told you I know how to handle money. My husband's business is paying off nicely. This is my money now." She chuckled again, proud, her voice carrying a confidence that sounded more like arrogance. Abina stood frozen, listening, her chest tightening with anger. Just a few steps away, her son lay weak and burning with fever, barely able to speak. Yet here was his wife, surrounded by wealth, celebrating herself while completely ignoring the man who made all of it possible. Abina's mind raced. Could it be that Adwoa had known Kojo was sick and simply didn't care? The thought made her stomach turn. Her eyes scanned the room. Shopping bags sat in the corner. Expensive brands she knew cost more than most families earned in months. On the sofa, a pair of high-heeled shoes still had their price tags on. It was obvious where the money was going. None of it was spent on Kojo's health or comfort. Not on a doctor, not even on proper food or care. Every Sadie was being poured into Adwoa's vanity. Abina clenched her fists, trying to control her emotions. Her mind kept flashing back to Kojo's pale face, his whisper of shame that no one had cared for him. And now, here in front of her, the truth revealed itself. His wife was not by his side, not worrying about his life. She was here, laughing over money, as though her husband's suffering was nothing more than background noise. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on Abina's heart. This was not just neglect. It was cold, calculated selfishness. In that moment, she understood. Adwoa's love had never been for Kojo, but for the wealth his hard work brought. And Abina knew she would not remain silent. Something had to be done. Abina could not hold herself back any longer. She stepped fully into the living room, her voice sharp and full of fire. "Adwoa," she called out, her eyes fixed on the table covered in money. "Why is my son lying in pain while you sit here counting cash?" Adwoa startled for a moment, quickly lowering the phone. She blinked at Abina, then gave a small smirk, as if the question was nothing serious. "He's a grown man," she said with a shrug, her tone flat and careless. "If he can't handle himself, that's not my problem." She picked up another stack of notes and started straightening them as if Abina's words were just background noise. The answer struck Abina like a slap. She felt her chest tighten with anger and disbelief. "Not your problem?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "This is your husband. He is sick, weak, burning with fever, and you, his wife, do not even care." Her voice rose, echoing through the room. She could hardly believe the coldness dripping from Adwoa's response. Adwoa rolled her eyes and leaned back in the chair, crossing her legs. "Look, Madam Abina, don't come here shouting at me. I've been managing this house, I've been managing money, and I don't have time to babysit a man who refuses to take care of himself. If he's sick, he'll get better. If not, that's his business." Her tone was so casual it made Abina's blood run cold. Abina took a step closer, her hands shaking, pointing toward the hallway. "Your husband has been sick for days. He has been alone with no doctor, no food, no comfort, nothing. And all this time you sit here, painting your nails, laughing on the phone, counting money that he worked for." Her voice broke, and her eyes burned with tears. "What kind of wife are you?" But Adwoa only gave a little laugh, almost mocking. "You think shouting at me will change anything? He is weak. I don't have time for weakness. I'm not going to waste my life nursing a man who can't even stand up. I have my own life to enjoy." She picked up her phone again, as if to end the conversation. Abina's heart pounded in her chest. For a moment, she was too stunned to speak. The cruelty, the selfishness, it was worse than she had imagined. She had expected excuses, maybe even lies, but not this raw and shameless disregard for her son's life. She slammed her hand on the table, startling Adwoa into dropping the phone. "You will answer me," she shouted, her voice fierce. "You will explain to me why my son suffers while you enjoy his sweat. This is not just negligence, it is betrayal, and I will not stand here and let it continue." The room fell tense, the music still playing softly in the background, mocking the storm that had just broken between the two women. Abina stood there, her chest rising and falling with anger, but her mind refused to rest. She could feel that what she had seen so far was only the surface. Something deeper was going on. She began to pay attention to the little details around the house. On the table, among the piles of cash, she noticed neatly folded deposit slips with Adwoa's name on them, not Kojo's. Her eyes narrowed. She picked one up, her hands trembling, and read it carefully. The money that should have gone into her son's business account was being redirected into Adwoa's personal account. Her throat tightened. She turned to Adwoa, holding up the slip. "Explain this. Why is all of Kojo's money going into your account?" Her voice was sharp, demanding. Adwoa didn't even flinch. Instead, she smirked. "Because I'm the one who knows how to use it. Kojo is too soft. He doesn't know how to enjoy wealth. What's the point of working so hard if you don't spend? He lets opportunities slip through his fingers, so I take charge." She said it proudly, as if she had done something smart, not shameful. Abina's stomach turned. Her son had been sacrificing, pushing himself in business, while this woman drained him dry. The picture was becoming clearer, piece by painful piece. She remembered the shopping bags in the corner, the expensive shoes with tags still on them, the constant flow of friends in and out of the house whenever she called Kojo from abroad. She had thought Adwoa was simply sociable, but now she saw it differently. Those friends were not visiting to support the family. They were there to enjoy Adwoa's free-spending lifestyle. She imagined the nights Kojo had probably been left alone in that room while laughter and music echoed from the living room. She imagined him listening to the sound of money being counted while his own health slipped away. The thought broke her heart. Abina sat down slowly, her legs weak. "So all this time, you never cared for him," she said quietly, almost to herself. "It was never about Kojo, was it? It was about the money." Adwoa gave a careless shrug. Love doesn't pay bills. Money does. And as long as he's bringing it in, I'll be here. But don't expect me to be a nurse. That's not what I signed up for. The words cut deeper than any knife. In that moment, Abina's fears turned into certainty. Her son had been deceived. This marriage was not built on love or loyalty, but on greed. Adwoa had married Kojo for the wealth he could provide, and now, when he needed her most, she had abandoned him in plain sight. Abina's fists clenched as a new determination rose inside her. She would not allow this betrayal to continue. Her son's life, and his legacy, had to be protected, no matter what it cost. Abina could not waste another second. She left Adwoa sitting smugly in the living room and rushed back to Kojo's bedside. His face was still pale, his breathing weak. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. She called a private doctor she trusted, someone who had worked with her family before. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but she made sure her instructions were clear. Come immediately, bring everything necessary, and do not delay. Within an hour, the doctor arrived with his medical bag. Abina stayed close as he examined Kojo, checking his temperature, listening to his heartbeat, and asking gentle questions. Kojo tried to answer, but his voice was so faint that it broke Abina's heart. The doctor gave him medicine, set up fluids to rehydrate him, and reassured Abina that with proper care, he would recover. Relief washed over her, though anger still burned inside. If she had not come home when she did, what would have happened to her son? When the doctor left the room for a moment to prepare more treatment, Abina sat beside Kojo, holding his hand tightly. He looked at her with tired eyes, guilt written all over his face. "Mama," he whispered, his lips trembling, "I didn't want you to see me like this." Abina's eyes filled with tears. "My son, why? Why suffer in silence? Why didn't you call me?" Kojo closed his eyes for a moment, his voice shaking as he confessed. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know that things in this house are not what they seem. Adwoa, she told me if I ever complained, if I ever showed weakness, she would leave me. She said I should stop acting like a child and handle my problems alone." His words came slowly, each one heavy with pain. Abina felt her chest ache as she listened. Her son, the same boy she had raised with so much care, had been suffering not just from illness, but from fear and emotional manipulation. He had been silenced in his own home, made to believe that needing help was a weakness. She stroked his hair gently, her voice soft but firm. "Kojo, you should never be ashamed to call on your mother. I will always come for you, no matter what. And no one, not even your wife, has the right to make you feel small." Tears rolled down Kojo's cheeks as he whispered, "I thought love was supposed to mean support, but Mama, she only cares about the money." His voice cracked, and Abina squeezed his hand tighter. In that moment, Abina's sorrow hardened into resolve. Her son would no longer be at the mercy of a woman who saw his value only in wealth. She had given life to him once, and now she would fight to give him a new beginning. This was the turning point. Things in the house would never remain the same again. Abina knew she could not simply argue with Adwoa and leave things at that. Words alone would not protect her son or undo the damage already done. What she needed now was proof, clear, undeniable evidence that showed exactly how Adwoa had been exploiting Kojo. That night, after making sure the doctor had settled Kojo comfortably, she stepped outside to the porch and made a call to her lawyer, a man she trusted like family. She explained the situation in a steady but emotional voice, leaving nothing out. He listened carefully and promised to come early the next morning to begin gathering the necessary documents. Over the next few days, Abina worked quietly, watching everything and noting the smallest detail. She went through some of Kojo's business records and realized the truth she had suspected. Most of the profits had indeed been rerouted into Adwoa's personal account. She found receipts from expensive boutiques, luxury salons, and trips, all under Adwoa's name, but not a single payment for hospital visits or proper medication. The evidence was piling up quickly, and Abina carefully stored each piece in a folder for her lawyer. She also paid attention to Adwoa's daily routine. Every afternoon, friends would come over, laughing loudly as they drank, played loud music, and ordered expensive food. Abina, sitting quietly in the background, overheard their conversations. More than once, she caught Adwoa boasting, "This house is mine now. Kojo can't even lift his head, and I'm the one in charge. Everything here answers to me." Her friends would clap and cheer, feeding her pride. Each careless word became another weapon Abina would use later. The lawyer visited and helped her gather witness accounts too. Neighbors who had noticed Adwoa's flashy lifestyle were ready to talk. A driver who had often dropped her and her friends at expensive clubs confirmed that the spending never stopped, even while Kojo was visibly unwell. Piece by piece, the case was becoming solid. Meanwhile, Adwoa remained blind to the storm building around. She walked through the house with a sense of ownership, snapping orders at the house help and speaking down to anyone who questioned her. Sometimes she would even walk past Kojo's door without glancing inside, humming to herself while holding shopping bags. One evening, Abina overheard her on the phone again, saying boldly, "Kojo is finished. He's weak, and I'm the one who controls the house now. Even his money knows who it belongs to." Abina's fists clenched as she listened, but she kept her face calm whenever Adwoa was near. She could not afford to show her hand too early. Her son's health was improving under the doctor's care, but his heart was still fragile, and the betrayal had left scars. Abina promised herself she would restore both his dignity and his security. The plan was set in motion. Adwoa thought she was untouchable, but soon the truth would strip her of every false crown she wore. Abina was determined. This time, justice would not whisper, it would roar. Abina waited until everything was ready before making her move. She chose a Friday evening, the perfect time when Adwoa usually loved to entertain her friends. With a calm smile, Abina suggested to Adwoa that they host a special dinner to celebrate family and success. Adwoa, thinking it was another chance to show off her wealth, quickly agreed. She invited her circle of friends, the same people who clapped when she bragged about owning the house. On the night of the dinner, the house was filled with chatter and laughter. The table was set with fine dishes, wine glasses shining under the lights, and music floating through the room. Adwoa was in her element, wearing a glittering dress and strutting around like a queen, making sure her friends noticed every detail. They praised her for her style, and she soaked in the admiration, throwing glances at Abina as if to say, "See, this is my world now." But Abina's eyes were steady, calm, hiding the storm she was about to unleash. When everyone was settled at the table, she rose to speak. "Thank you all for joining this evening," she began warmly. "Family and friends should always share in good times and bad. Tonight, I want us to hear some truths that have been hidden for too long." A hush fell over the room as Abina signaled to her lawyer, who was seated quietly at the end of the table. He stood, opened a thick folder, and began to read. At first, the guests listened with mild curiosity. Bank records, receipts, statements. He laid them all out clearly. Money from Kojo's business accounts being funneled into Adwoa's personal account. Lavish spending at boutiques, clubs, and salons. Witness reports from neighbors and drivers who had seen her lifestyle up close. And then the phone recordings. Adwoa's own voice boasting that she controlled the house, while her husband lay sick and neglected. The room grew silent, the air heavy with shock. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some glancing at Adwoa with wide eyes. The confidence she had worn all evening began to crumble. Her painted smile faltered as her friends looked from the lawyer's documents to her trembling hand. "Lies." Adwoa tried to laugh, though her voice cracked. "This is all twisted. You people don't understand." But her friends were already whispering, doubt written on their faces. The evidence was too clear, too overwhelming. Abina's voice cut through the tension, strong and steady. "While my son was sick and abandoned, his wife was living like a queen on his sweat. This is the truth that has been hiding in this house." Adwoa's face fell completely. The proud woman who once boasted of her power now sat in silence, exposed in front of the very people she had worked so hard to impress. One by one, her friends avoided her eyes, their admiration turning into pity and disgust. The night that was meant to be another stage for her pride became the stage of her downfall. And Abina, standing tall at the head of the table, knew the war was almost won. Kojo had grown stronger with each passing day, thanks to the doctor's care and his mother's unwavering presence. Though still weak, his spirit was slowly returning. He had heard whispers of what his mother was doing in the background, but he hadn't seen the full picture until one morning, when Abina sat him down and gently explained everything. She told him about the evidence, the bank records, the testimonies, and how Adwoa's mask had finally slipped in front of her own friend. Kojo sat in silence for a long time, his jaw tight, his eyes heavy with hurt. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, though pain lingered in it. "All this time, I thought she loved me. I thought I was the problem, that I was weak, not enough. But Mama, she only wanted the money." His hands clenched on his lap. "And I let her treat me like I was nothing." Abina placed a hand over his, her voice soft but firm. "You are not nothing, my son. You are my blood, my pride. She tried to strip you of your dignity, but she failed. Now you will rise again." Later that week, Kojo asked to see Adwoa. When she entered the room, her usual confidence was gone. Her eyes darted around nervously, knowing the weight of the truth already hung between them. Kojo sat upright, his strength visible not just in his body but in his voice. "You chose my money over me," he said, each word sharp like a blade. "Now you will have neither." Adwoa flinched, her lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. The calmness in Kojo's voice scared her more than any shouting could. He was no longer the broken man she had ignored. He was reclaiming himself, piece by piece. Abina made sure the legal process moved quickly. The lawyer filed the necessary papers to remove Adwoa from any access to Kojo's finance. The accounts were frozen, then shifted back entirely under Kojo's name. The house title was corrected, the cars taken from her control, every asset untangled from the web she had built. What once gave her a false sense of power was slipping out of her hands, one signature at a time. The day the changes were finalized, Adwoa stood at the doorway, watching movers take away the keys she once flaunted. She tried to argue, to beg, even to threaten, but no one listened. Her friends had already distanced themselves, ashamed to be linked with her scandal. The empire she had built on greed crumbled like sand under her feet. Kojo watched quietly from his chair, his mother standing beside him. For the first time in weeks, his eyes carried strength again. Abina rested her hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Justice has been served." Adwoa walked out of the house with nothing. And for Kojo, though his heart still ached, it was the beginning of freedom. He had lost a wife, but he had regained his dignity, and that was worth far more. Adwoa's fall was swift and merciless. The same friends who once filled her living room with laughter and music now avoided her calls. They whispered behind her back, mocking the arrogance she once carried. In public, people pointed and shook their heads. She was no longer the glamorous wife of a wealthy man. She was the woman who betrayed her husband for money and lost everything. Back in the house, peace slowly began to return. Kojo was on the road to recovery, his strength coming back each day. Sometimes he sat quietly, ashamed of how blind he had been, but Abina always reminded him that shame belonged to those who deceive, not those who are deceived. "You trusted, and that is not a weakness," she told him gently. "Her greed destroyed her, not you." One evening, as she reflected on all that had happened, Abina spoke words that carried the weight of truth. "A wife who counts money while her husband suffers," she said, "is only counting her own downfall." The sentence hung in the air, sharp and unforgettable. Kojo held his mother's hand, his voice filled with gratitude. "Mama, you saved me. Without you, I don't know where I would be." Abina smiled softly, brushing his shoulder like she had when he was a boy. "My son, you will rise again. This is only the beginning." In the end, the scandal left more than disgrace. It left a lesson. Wealth without loyalty is empty. Love without care is a lie. Abina knew her son would rebuild his life, stronger and wiser, and she hoped others would remember too. Money may fill pockets, but only love and loyalty can truly fill a home.